I'm Ben, and I'm over 30 years old this year. I have a stable job at a small company in the city, but because I needed more money to send back to my family at home, I worked part-time in the evenings after work. My job is to drive rental cars for people who can't drive themselves home because of the drunkenness or other reasons. I always go around the city in a small folding electric bike to find customers. Sometimes I also find customers through a website. After receiving the booking, I ran the customer's address, then folded my folding electric bike and put it in the trunk of the customer's car. Most of the guests were in a drunken state. I've been doing this job for a while, so I've experienced many cases. Some people get drunk and then fall asleep without knowing what's going on. I preferred that because they would be quiet and not make me annoyed. And some people, even though they were drunk, still refused to sleep and talk a lot. Sometimes I don't know what they were talking about, so I didn't know how to answer them. I just kept quiet or smile. Well, that's what I usually do. After completing a booking, I took out my folding electric bike and continued to go to other places. I clearly remember the story that happened that day while I was working. It was about 10 o'clock at night. After driving a customer home safely, I immediately received another booking. This booking seemed a bit far, but I still took it because I needed the money more. I called to confirm the booking. I checked the correct address of the customer. After that, I said that I would come as soon as possible. I immediately turned around and ran as fast as I could to the agreed rendezvous point after hanging up the phone. It was a relatively remote place located on the edge of the city, next to a small river. It took more than 25 minutes from where I said goodbye to the old customer to the agreed rendezvous point. I was worried that the customer wouldn't be able to wait. Arriving at the place, I still did not see anyone there. There were no cars or people and no streetlights, so it was very dark. I took the phone to call the customer, but there was no signal from the other end of the line. It seemed the customer had locked the phone. I called again and again to no avail. At this time, I was a little annoyed. After all, I had to run a long distance in a hurry because I didn't want customers to wait. But when I got there, I was cheated like this. But I was not too upset because this was not the first time I had encountered this situation. Perhaps because customers were drunk, they sometimes made a booking unconsciously and then disappeared or didn't accept it when I arrived. After thinking that, I also turned around and quickly returned to the city to take other orders. A few weeks later, I was eating cup noodles in my room and watching the news on the television. Suddenly, a news show shocked me a bit. I was having a quick meal and going to be ready for a night job, but had to stop to watch the news. In the news, the reporter was interviewing an older man about the case that was discovered this morning. He was the one who detected it, so they wanted him to report again on what he saw. Although the older man was shocked, he still explained the case very clearly. The older man's house was not far from this riverbank. Every early morning he used to have a habit of walking to the side of the river and stopping there for exercise before returning home. He did the same thing this morning as usual. Suddenly he saw something on the river that made him panic. He then immediately informed the police. There was a car in the river. Someone lost control of the steering wheel and plunged into the river. Fortunately, the car was sunk not far from the shore, so the older man could see it. Police immediately arrived at the scene and used a crane to pull the vehicle from the river to the shore. The driver unfortunately suffocated to death in the driver's seat. I was still watching the news intently. As soon as the TV came to the part of the license plate, it scared me because I remembered it so well. According to the autopsy, this case happened more than 20 days ago. After hearing that, I was even more surprised. I remembered this booking very well because it was cancelled and it happened only half a month ago. But if I followed the police, maybe I would encounter a ghost or something. I wasn't daring to think so much about it anymore. I still went out and continued my work. That night, I took bookings as usual. One of them was when I drove a young man home. He appeared to be drunk. The customer was sleeping suddenly. He woke up and panicked and told me to stop the car immediately. I was driving in silence, so that thing startled me too. I quickly asked him what was going on, and he answered me in a very annoyed tone. He blamed me if I didn't see the injured person lying ahead of us, but asked me like that. He then got out of the car and walked straight ahead, seemingly lifting something. I looked at his gesture, like he was helping someone from the ground, and then walked towards the car. I thought he was too drunk to have such an illusion, but he was serious and urged me to hurry up to the hospital. I felt a little funny, so I told him that he was too drunk and I would quickly take him home to rest. But then he got even angrier when he heard that. He scolded me for being inhuman and wanted to hurry to the hospital. Then he turned to talk to the next empty seat in a real way. His actions were not the slightest hint of being drunk or hallucinating. That thing stunned me. He also pulled out a tissue and passed it to the side. He asked the invisible person to wipe the blood first. After seeing that, I still wouldn't drive away. He held at me to tell me to hurry up. I had no choice but to do as he said. Even though I didn't understand what was going on the way he constantly talked and gave a tissue to wipe the blood of the invisible person. His face was still worried. I glanced in the rearview mirror, still no one beside him, but the young man's appearance was very real, not drunken. I ended up taking him to the hospital as he wished. It was a long way from the hospital to his house, so I would ask for more money as soon as I finished. After arriving at the hospital, he was still talking to the empty seat. He opened the door to let the invisible man out. I also didn't know how to dissuade him. If the young man went to the hospital like that, he would probably be laughed at by the people inside the hospital, but he did not listen to my advice. Then I too got out of the car to get some fresh air, waiting for him to come back. At that time, I was also thinking about what happened, so I involuntarily looked at the back seat. The tissues from earlier were scattered all over the car's floor, but the scary thing was that they were actually stained with blood, just like what the young man said earlier was true. But obviously, I didn't see anyone in the car. There was no way I could be wrong. Could it be that the person who was hallucinating was me? Because it was clear that the tissue had blood on it. Or was I having bad luck again? Thinking about that, I remembered my booking that night. It was extremely scary. I quickly opened the trunk to get the folding electric bike and drove back quickly without notifying the young man. Then I got a call from him. It seemed that I was not the one who was hallucinating because the people in the hospital didn't see anyone injured either. He blamed me for not telling him the truth at the time. I just listened and hung up because I couldn't believe it myself. Although I had encountered many cases, this time was surely the weirdest.